House in Baltimore now, and Luke Jones has been awake late through some rain delays and some tarpaulin lays, as well as I'm stuck with Jim Hunter and Mike Bordick doing sports radio, if you can believe that. But Luke is also getting up very early in the morning to do not just radio with us here at WNST.net, but making his way onto the at least not torridly hot fields of Owings Mills. Luke, I've looked at the forecast the next 2 weeks. 81, 82, 84. Hey, there's no Bucko 6 here this week. We'll at least give thanks for that, correct?
I will gladly take that. I mean, it can get sweltering. I think back to the old days in Westminster, and some training camps here in recent history. There have been some that haven't been so bad, but yeah, you get into that 95, 96, and if you're on the backfields in Owings Mills, there's no tree cover. I mean, you are baking. So I will gladly.
And there are a lot of bugs too. Let's point. I want to make sure everybody understands that the discomfort of being there isn't the heat. It's not the sun. It's not the lack of trees. The problem there for me are the bugs.
Yeah, it can be that, but fortunately for the Ravens.
Well, I hate bugs, just so you know. I mean, I find it very hard to practice, even yoga with bugs in my eyes.
Yeah, that's no fun. But the good news for the Ravens, at least on Wednesday, no problem of a season-ending injury, which, I mean, I know we've been wearing out the WNST.net text service. It's been so much downtrodden, depressing news. Was nice to have a little bit of a break from that. Doesn't mean they're out of the woods. We've talked at length about Joe Flacco. I asked John Harbaugh about him. He's progressing. We don't know quite yet when he's going to be back on the practice field as we reach the 1 week mark, which was never the guarantee that he was going to be back on the field. It was at that point to kind of reassess where he is. It sounds positive there. We'll see. Again, it's a back. You don't know for sure until he's back on the field practicing without incident. And then the other one to keep an eye on, Brashad Perriman, who John Harbaugh said it was minor. I do find it maybe just coincidental, but the next day, Harbaugh says he's no longer going to be commenting on time frames for return for injuries, and Brashad Perriman was not out there on Wednesday. So you wonder if maybe that hamstring a little more serious than they initially thought.
That's not something we want to hear, right?
I know,
I mean, that would be its own headline if the Saragoosas weren't going down and I weren't on the radio talking about Colin Kaepernick 12 hours a day.
Yeah. And again,
and the Kaepernick story, that was the drama Wednesday. The drama Wednesday was the owner was brought out to light on being against signing Colin Kaepernick, or at least resistant to it, and the organization had to shoot that. I mean, that was really on social media the big story on Wednesday, right?
It was, and it was an interesting story because the initial report from Diana Rossini of ESPN basically acknowledged that John Harbaugh and Ozzie Newsome supported signing Colin Kaepernick, and they've been met with some resistance from Steve Bisciotti, which I don't know about you. Look, I get it that it's a story. I mean, you just say Colin Kaepernick, and Twitter and Facebook just explode.
I thought Andrew Brandt had the best point, and I retweeted it, which is, they'll be pissed, and fans that are going to burn their tickets and all that, and then Cincinnati comes, and they'll all come back, because that's the way. I mean, people support the Baltimore Orioles after 25 years of this creep owning the team. I mean, after Albert Bell, after, steroids, after playing a game for people, I don't want to say the fans are sheep, and I sit here and watch the Orioles every night, and they've beaten me like a dog for 20 years. There is a point where it's like, you know what, he didn't commit any crimes, and if that's where you are on it, people will get over it, and they want to win football games, and he's still capable of helping them win football games.
Well, and we can get into that, but the point I was trying to make was, Steve Bisciotti, to me, made it kind of clear with his comments on Sunday at the Fan Forum that he had reservations about it.
That was the word I was going to use, reservations.
Yeah,
that's the exact word, right?
So I found it interesting that...
And he should. If you owned the team or I did, we'd have to...
we'd
have to pray on it, as he said, right? A little bit, right? Think about it.
Ultimately, it's a business, and you can talk all you want about whether there should be backlash for it or not. I mean, to me, I find it strange that if you're going to give up your season tickets for that, which, look, I'm not saying you have to like what Colin Kaepernick did, but as you pointed out, he was exercising his First Amendment rights. He was.
Hey, by the way, I own WNST, right? So to make this, personal and full, 20 years into this, I had a host make racist comments on my radio station one day. I heard it. He no longer works here. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't want that on me. You know what I mean? It has my name on it. So I understand this as well as anyone would, just for what it was worth to my career, being on the radio and having a goof on my radio station, making racist jokes on the air. I didn't like that very much, and I didn't want that sticking to me, and I put an end to it. So I understand. I mean, I know where he's coming from, and I know the importance of what your brand represents and what you stand for. I mean, I stand for things politically that people don't like. That's fine, but I know what I stand for, and I'm proud of what I stand for, and I don't want racism associated with me or my country or my brand or my team. So I have a strong feeling about that, and I'm sure Steve Bisciotti would have a strong feeling about the $800,000 they were getting from the government to, parade planes over top and fly the flag and bringing Lee Greenwood in to sing Proud to be an American. I mean, there's a part of that is bigger than can he win a game if Joe Flacco turns a knee for him.
Sure. So, the report itself, I don't feel like, if you take it for what it's really worth and the wording of it, I don't think it's necessarily shocking, but the perception of it certainly is not good because, and clearly Ozzie Newsome issued the statement to say that, Steve Bisciotti has not banned them from signing Colin Kaepernick. They're still going through the process. They haven't made a decision, but made it very clear that Steve has not told them that they cannot sign Kaepernick. So I think that just shows how careful they're trying to be from a perception standpoint in that regard, because you don't want it to look like you're on opposite sides. What has made the Ravens so successful for so long has been the united front. We're not naive enough to think that there haven't been disagreements behind closed doors and that you don't have differences of opinion.
There always are, right?
You're not going to agree on every player. You're not going to agree on every situation. But I think from a perception standpoint, you don't want it to sound like, well, your owner is blocking a football decision, and that's something we've talked about a lot with the Orioles, quite frankly. So, I understand why they issued the statement. The reality is, it hasn't been a great look because they just, and it really just started with John Harbaugh coming out so strong talking about Colin Kaepernick, and they haven't made a decision, and I get that, and I wrote at length about that, why they've remained in a holding pattern, but in the court of public opinion, when we have a 24/7 news cycle, we have you have a forum that is your smartphone away from chiming in. Anyone can chime in, which is both a great thing and a horrendous thing when you really think about it. But
hot takes.
They've been beaten up on this, and I think you can say, well, they've done a lot of, even if they wouldn't call it that, the perception is they've done a lot of public waffling on this. And that's not a good look. And
well, the public waffling part is because they don't know whether their quarterback's going to be upright or not. Right? And if they sign Kaepernick, the perception is he would be paid more. And you and I have been through the Matt Schaubs and the Mark Bulgers and whatever, guys that you didn't even know were on the team, but who made $3.8 million that year, not being really kind of being an insurance policy.
And it's not even just that. If that's all it was and they had $14 million of cap space right now, fine. That's no biggie. But when you've already had some injuries on your offensive line, so you're dealing with some attrition there. That you lost two starters,
and you don't know who your center is. You don't know who your right tackle is.
And that's been my whole point. Is look, I get it. Ryan Mallett has struggled. I've written that. I've seen what everyone else has seen. It's been really difficult to watch. But that said, they had a starting offensive line. Now, they held Ronnie Stanley and Jensen out for a good portion of Wednesday's practice. Neither guy left the field. Didn't look like any big deal or anything like that. But you could tell they were both kind of, they were struggling a little bit. Whether it was heat-related. I know Stanley was in a little bit of a collision earlier in practice and seemed to be, a little shaken up. You said it was fine. We'll take him at his word for now. But having those two guys leave, which are two projected starters if the season were to kick off today, that prompted them to have an offensive line ready for this. left tackle James Hurst, left guard Alex Lewis, center Matt Skora, right guard because they're keeping Marshall Yanda on kind of a slow progression right now, which is fine. He's fine. They're just taking it slow with him. Jermaine Illuminora was the right guard, their 5th-round pick.
Yeah, you got to go play against the Steelers, with this, right?
Right. I mean, and Stefan Nembot was their right tackle. So of their the 5 members of the first-team offensive line they were using for the bulk of practice Wednesday, and it was practice. I mean, those guys probably would have been on the field had they been playing a game, but it just speaks to the utter lack of depth. Of those 5 guys on their, quote, first-team offensive line for most of Wednesday's practice, 3 of them have never been on a 53-man roster before. I mean, just think about that. And one of the other 2 is James Hurst, who's been as maligned as anyone in this town over the last 3 years or so. So that right there just speaks to, you can talk all you want about Colin Kaepernick, and if they sign him and they get him on the cheap, and you have an improved backup situation, and you have an insurance policy if Joe's back flares up in week 4, that's well and good, but the state of this offensive line right now, I'm not sure they're good enough even with Joe Flacco behind an offensive line like that, let alone talking about Ryan Mallett or Colin Kaepernick. So, we can talk all we want about the quarterback position. I get it. That's the sexy topic of conversation, especially when you throw Kaepernick into the equation and how polarizing of a figure he is. To me, I still look at this offensive line, and I'm still way more concerned because, you want to have an offensive line that's able to protect your quarterback who is dealing with a cranky back right now.
And no running game, and no tight end, and Rashad Perryman hurt, which I still think is, of all the stories, that, Perryman not being on the fields, that would be the lead right now if it weren't for all this other noise going on, right?
Flacco's just kind of the given lead. I mean, that's the most important thing.
Well, the new lead, I would say, the new story, the fresh
because, and I've said this to you, even with the Jeremy Maclin signing, if the Ravens are going to be a good offense, I'm not talking middle of the pack where they're struggling to score 20 points and they're leaning so heavily on their defense. If they're going to be a good offense, I think a lot of it is going to be Rashad Perriman's going to pop to some degree. And, doesn't mean he's going to have 1,200 yards, but he's going to be a big part of what they do. This is why I was so disappointed to see Kenneth Dixon go down. This is an offense that needs some upside. It's great to have some reliable performers, and they have some. It's not as though they have no talent on the offensive side of the ball, but there's a lot of just meh. There's a lot of, kind of shrugging your shoulders at some positions right now. Look, I think Terrence West can do a fine job if he's got a good offensive line in front of him. But to me, Kenneth Dixon was a guy that could be a special kind of talent that could kind of break out this year and maybe be their most productive running back since Ray Rice. Who knows? But you don't have him, and now with Perriman. And look, a lot of this is speculative on my part, but I find it very, I don't know if it's just coincidental that a day after he leaves the field with the hamstring issue that John Harbaugh said didn't appear to be a big deal, all of a sudden he shuts down specifics on injuries. That just makes me, especially given how poorly the organization handled the public, commenting on Perriman's knee injury 2 years ago, where I thought they really put him in a bad position as a rookie player, not sticking up for him and kind of making it look like, this guy maybe wasn't as tough as he needed to be and all of that. So I don't know. It seems awfully. Seems like a little more than coincidental that John Harbaugh kind of shuts down talking about injuries the day after Perriman goes off the field and, wasn't on the field on Wednesday. So I hope that's just me being a speculative reporter and there's no connection there. But until we see him back on the field, we'll certainly be skeptical.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter as well as Luke at WNST.net. All right, give me a little prep here over the next 7 days because I don't think anybody's going to like what they see against the Redskins next Thursday night because first off, they're not going to see Joe Flacco, right? So Mallett or Kaepernick or whoever's under, whoever the players are going to be, Yanda's not, the thing we're going to see next Thursday going to be sloppy no matter what is my prediction, right?
Yeah, and I think it's going to be really sloppy. Now, the defense, you hope the defense plays well. I would imagine you hold out Terrell Suggs. I would imagine you could see even Eric Weddle held. You got to be careful. I mean, we've talked so much about these preseason games, and Roger Goodell talked about it at the fan forum at the stadium on Sunday, basically acknowledging it. He made it sound a little bit better, but the gist of it was we kind of know that the preseason football is a very inferior product, so they're trying to figure out the best way to kind of handle that.
I'm telling you, Earth, Wind, and Fire at halftime. That's what they should do.
Guys need to get their work in. It's not as though the preseason has zero value, but for guys that are veteran players, established players, guys who have nothing to prove, get them out there for the second preseason game a little bit. The third preseason game we know is that all-important kind of dress rehearsal. But I would expect to see quite a few individuals held out. Flacco's just not going to have enough practice time really under his belt, even if they were going to play him to begin with. Even if the back issue had never come to fruition, you wonder if they'd play him in the first preseason game at this stage of his career. Yanda, same thing. You just kind of go down the list. I would expect next Thursday night, probably going to be really, really sloppy, might be very, very ugly on the offensive side of the ball. You hope the defense plays well because, hey, the amount of resources pumped into that defensive unit, that better be a special defense this year. Maybe not historically special, but it better be a top 3, top 4 kind of a unit. Otherwise, you wonder, well, maybe you should have put a little more into your offense if it's not going to be an elite defense. There's that elite word again.
I like that. That's the E word. I like that.
Yeah, but, it's over this next week, we kind of count down to that first fake football game, which, there's always that anticipation.
Oh, I can't wait.
Then they kick it off.
My favorite part is we get to hang out with Redskins fans. That's what makes it even more special.
Yeah, so, it's going to be...
we might even lose.
Yeah, well, again, when you look at the starting offense right now and the issues they're having, you can only imagine what the backups look like. And I'm not trying to get personal with any of those guys. They're working hard. They're trying to win jobs. But I can just tell you with some of their holding out some of their vets during Wednesday's practice on the offensive line, it's funny as it sounds to call Ronnie Stanley a vet. He kind of feels that way now.
So does Alex Lewis, right?
Yeah. But it was so disjointed. So, they were constantly having to stop plays and huddle back. I mean, it was a mess. And we've seen too much of that. As much as Ryan Mallett's felt the brunt of it, there's been a lot of disjointed activity from the offense. And frankly, on Wednesday, there were some stretches where they looked like they hadn't practiced all summer. I mean, that's how disjointed it was. So they have a lot of work to do. And with that thought in mind, might want to brace yourself next Thursday night. And keep in mind, it's the first preseason game. Even if they lose by 40 points, who cares as long as you get guys back healthy and start making some improvements internally as you're on the practice field over the summer.
He is Luke Jones, Baltimore Luke, out on Twitter, as well as Luke at WNST.net. If there's any breaking news out there, God, I hope not. It comes to you first on the WNST Tech Service. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And, of course, Dennis is here Thursday, this Thursday, next Thursday, every Thursday from 3 until 5 with the SSV on WNST. The Buy a Toyota Audio Vault is there and open for business 24 hours a day. You can listen to what you want, when you want, where you want. It's all in the buyatoyota.com Audio Vault. If you want to listen live, just download the TuneIn Radio app, and bingo, there we are. Don't forget, our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox digitally at 7 a.m. each and every morning. That's powered up by our friends at Planet Fitness and planetfitness.com. Last but never least, Nasty at WNST.net, because I am a very available individual. Chapter 9 of the Peter Principles released out there. Albert Bell, Cuba, even words like Mike Timlin, things that you have maybe forgotten all about. Nasty at WNST.net, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.